At the Kingsley gala, I ended a 6-year engagement in front of the city's elite. My fiancé had brought his secretary, the same one flaunting my life on social media, as his date. By the time the night ended, his family's empire was collapsing, his secretary was blacklisted, and I walked away without looking back. Sometimes the best revenge is leaving the door wide open for a better life. The chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 captive stars, their golden light spilling over the crystal glasses and satin gowns that filled the grand Marcellus ballroom. Waiters in black and white glided past like clockwork, offering trays of champagne flutes, canapés dusted with edible gold, and miniature desserts so delicate they looked painted. I stood near the central marble pillar, my black mermaid gown hugging my figure with understated elegance. One hand rested lightly on the stem of my wine glass, though I hadn't taken a single sip. The other stayed loosely by my side as I exchanged polite smiles and restrained greetings with the other guests. As Isla Bennett, daughter of Richard Bennett, the Bennett name, there was no need for me to play the sycophant. People came to me, not the other way around. Still, I kept my tone low and manner composed. My father always said, "The higher you stand, the calmer you must appear." The only thing marring my composure tonight was the absence of the man who should have been at my side. Cole Harrington, my fiancé, was already 10 minutes late. I glanced toward the grand double doors at the far end of the room, their carved wood panels gleaming beneath the lights. Still nothing. I could feel a few subtle glances from acquaintances, pitying ones from women who adored gossip, curious ones from men who wondered if Cole and I were truly as perfect a match as society whispered. Finally, in the 11th minute, I saw him. Cole walked in with the effortless grace that came from years of refining his public image. A tailored midnight suit, silk tie perfectly knotted, hair just slightly tousled in that studied, deliberate way. His face, as always, looked like it belonged on the cover of a luxury watch campaign. Handsome, refined, a hint of detachment in the eyes that made people lean closer without realizing it. But before I could greet him, before I could say anything, a voice rang out behind him. "Wow, Mr. Harrington, this lady and I are wearing the same dress." The words, sweet yet far too loud for a setting like this, drew immediate attention from the nearby guests. My gaze shifted past Cole's shoulder and my fingers tightened on my glass. Trailing behind him was a young woman whose bright, almost naive energy jarred against the formal elegance of the evening. Sophie Lane. Her face carried that wide-eyed freshness of someone still new to society events. The type who thought a pretty smile could bridge any gap in status. She looked stunning in her own way, though what truly made my pulse sharpen wasn't her beauty. It was her gown. The same mermaid cut, the same daring yet tasteful neckline, the same subtle beadwork along the train, but where mine was black, hers was a dazzling white. And both, unmistakably, came from the same master designer. Cole started, "Isla, this is..." I'd already folded my arms, my expression cool as I let my gaze sweep over Sophie from head to toe. The silence between my words was deliberate, measured. Other guests nearby were already glancing over, sensing tension. Cole finally finished his sentence. "This is my secretary, Sophie Lane." Sophie's smile only brightened. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." Her lashes fluttered as she glanced around, as though seeking approval from every face in the room. "Mr. Harrington brought me tonight to broaden my horizons." A single brow arched before I could stop it. "A secretary from such a well-off family," I remarked evenly. "Wearing a $30 million gown." The murmur that followed rippled like wind through silk. Sophie blinked, then glanced down at her dress as if only now realizing the implications. Cole's eyes darted briefly between us before landing on her gown. The resemblance to mine was impossible to ignore now. His jaw tightened ever so slightly. The whispers grew. Without breaking stride, Cole slipped off his suit jacket and draped it over Sophie's shoulders. "Put this on," he said quietly. "I'll have the driver take you home first." Her lower lip trembled and her eyes shimmered, making her look like a frightened rabbit. She clutched the jacket to her chest as though she'd been wounded beyond repair. Then she turned and fled toward the exit, the sight carefully designed to make me look cruel in comparison. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Cole straightened and turned back to me, his face already slipping into the smooth, diplomatic mask he wore in public. "I apologize for the interruption," he said softly, as if the moment had been nothing more than a small mishap. Then he offered me his arm. I took it, but my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. The rest of the evening was a dance of appearances. Cole greeted old acquaintances, spoke to investors, laughed at the right moments. From the outside we looked like the perfect power couple again. But I felt the faint strain in his grip, the flicker in his gaze each time someone's eyes darted toward the door Sophie had exited through. And I filed it away. Every flicker, every tell. Because in my world there are no coincidences. When the clock neared 11, I realized Cole had disappeared without a word. Guests asked politely where he'd gone, and I answered with the same serene smile each time. Urgent work at the company, I told them. He had to leave early. When the party ended, I called him. The phone rang almost to the last tone before someone picked up. Where did you go? Asked my tone calm. A sweet, unfamiliar female voice answered. Ah, is this Miss Bennet? Mr. Harrington's a bit busy right now. I'll have him call you back. I smiled into the phone, though it wasn't the kind of smile anyone would want directed at them. Put Cole on the phone, I said, my voice cold enough to frost glass. Now. That was the night I stopped being the fiancé who forgave everything. That was the night the first crack appeared in Cole Harrington's perfect world. Cole's idea of an apology was as expensive as it was calculated. The morning after the cocktail party, a courier arrived at my penthouse with 3 garment bags from niche European designers, names known only to those with the right level of access and taste. Each dress was unique, the craftsmanship immaculate. A handwritten card accompanied them. Slaw. Consider this a promise that no one will ever match you again. If he thought a few gowns could erase the image of Sophie Lane trailing behind him like a pampered debutante, he underestimated me. I placed the card in my desk drawer without a reply. That afternoon, I went to Cole's office to deliver a gift for his grandfather's upcoming birthday. Cole was flying to Zurich the next morning for a business meeting and wouldn't be present for the celebration, so I'd agreed to have him pass the gift along. His top-floor office suite was all glass and steel, flooded with sunlight. But it wasn't the view that caught my attention when I walked in. It was Sophie. She had propped her phone against Cole's monitor and was in the middle of what looked like a traditional stretching routine. Something between yoga and Tai Chi, right there in his office as if she owned the space. One leg extended, arms flowing in exaggerated slow motion, expression serene. A laugh almost escaped me. Almost. Instead, I let a small, amused breath slip out. Both she and Cole turned at the sound. Cole looked entirely unfazed. What brings you here? I didn't take his outstretched hand. My arms crossed instead, my heels clicking against the marble as I stepped inside. Sophie's eyes lit up in false delight. Oh, Miss Bennet. We meet again. Her voice was high and sweet enough to rot teeth. You didn't get a chance to sit last night. Come have a seat now. She walked over and gripped my arm like we were old friends, her manicured nails pressing into my skin until I hissed quietly in discomfort. Before I could shake her off, Mason Reed, my personal security and longtime aide, stepped forward from behind me. In one swift, fluid motion, he pried her hand off me and twisted her wrist just enough to make her gasp. Her shriek echoed through the glass walls. I didn't so much as blink. Mason, I murmured, you're due for a raise. She stumbled back, clutching her wrist, eyes wide and wet with fear. Sophie, is it? I said coolly. As a secretary, you should know how to greet the woman your boss is marrying. Not with false familiarity. And certainly not with your hands. Cole's jaw tightened. But instead of looking at me, he turned to Mason. That was unnecessary. She's a young woman. Mason's face didn't move. Protecting Miss Bennet is my job, sir. Not just anyone gets to touch her. Internally, I applauded him. Cole stared at Mason for a long moment, then picked up his office phone. Will, he said to his assistant, come take Sophie to the hospital. Follow reimbursement procedures. Sophie was trembling now, her voice small and pitiful. I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington. Miss Bennet, I only wanted to be friendly. Please don't blame him. I'll work harder to prove myself worthy. Please don't call me trash. She even bowed. The performance might have worked on Cole once. But not today. You can go, Cole said quietly. If there was one thing Sophie Lane seemed to understand perfectly, it was the power of an audience. By the end of the week, her social media accounts were updating with clockwork precision. The captions were coy, the angles flattering, and the settings unmistakably expensive. Her first post was a close-up of a silver bracelet resting delicately on her wrist, the diamond-studded D+ logo catching the light. The price tag, if one knew where to look, was upwards of $180,000. Caption read, "A gift from the best boss in the world. Gemstones sparkles." The comments flooded in. "You're so lucky. OMG, Mr. Harrington has taste. Is he single?" Face with tears of joy. Cole had liked it. The second post came 2 days later. A glossy shot of a structured C-brand handbag worth $800,000. The kind of bag with a months-long waiting list even for people who could afford it. Her words were even more pointed this time. "Feeling so spoiled lately. Black heart." And Cole liked it. Then came the photo that made me still. A table for two at Noir, the city's most exclusive fine dining restaurant. The centerpiece dish, perfectly seared steak, had been sliced into symmetrical bite-sized pieces and plated in front of her. In the background, partially blurred but unmistakable, sat Cole, knife and fork in hand. His posture leaned ever so slightly toward her. He captioned it, "When your boss insists on cutting your steak because you'll make a mess of it. Cut of meat." It was the kind of intimate gesture that in my world was reserved for lovers. Or at the very least for family. The final straw was a photograph uploaded at nearly midnight. Sophie on his back, her legs wrapped in gauze, her arms around his shoulders. Cole was laughing, his head turned slightly toward her. Caption read, "Leg injury came back. Best CEO in the world still carried me all the way home. Rabbit." My phone screen dimmed in my hand as an old memory pushed forward without permission. I was 19 again, leaning on crutches after a sports accident. Cole had carried me from the parking lot up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. "From now on, you're the only one I'll carry," he'd said back then, his voice still holding the warmth of a boy who hadn't yet learned to guard himself. I'd teased him, "You're too tall. I'm scared up here." He'd bent his back slightly. "Not so tall now, right?" I'd made him promise. "Only me, Cole. No one else. Or your back will be dirty." He'd sworn it. That night I didn't call him. I didn't text. Cole didn't reach out to me either. And this time his silence stretched for 10 full days. 10 days was more than enough for me to get things in motion. Quiet conversations, strategic reminders to certain people about who really held the Harrington family's safety net. Cole's fatal flaw wasn't just Sophie. It was the belief that 6 years together made us unshakable. That I would always forgive. That the Harringtons standing in the business world was their own achievement, not a gift propped up by my family name. By day 11 I was ready. When my father called that morning, his voice was calm but pointed. "Get to the Kingsley business gala. Now." I almost smiled. No one knew Richard Bennett was attending tonight. Which meant Cole had no idea. And from the edge in my father's voice, I suspected Sophie Lane had just walked herself into the lion's den. The Kingsley Business Gala was a fortress of glass, gold and power. Security was 10 times heavier than usual. Men in tailored black suits lined the entrance, discreet earpieces in place. Even the air seemed thicker, charged with the knowledge that tonight would draw the city's most untouchable figures. By the time I arrived, the red carpet outside was already a slow-moving river of jewels, silk and designer shoes. Photographers flashed and called out names. The journalist had been carefully screened to ensure not a single scandal leaked without permission. Inside, the chandeliers burned brighter than they had at the cocktail party. Every corner of the room was threaded with conversation, deals made in low tones, laughter that never reached the eyes. But all of it seemed to bend, to shift when Richard Bennett stepped into the hall. My father had always known how to make an entrance without seeming to try. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that made even the most arrogant CEO lower his voice. When he smiled, he looked like a benevolent statesman. When he didn't, people remembered exactly how many companies he'd buried with a single phone call. The moment he crossed the threshold, the room reacted like iron filings to a magnet. The chairman of the Kingsley Group himself came forward to greet him. Behind him, a ripple of the city's most powerful followed suit. Industrial magnates, political donors, shipping tycoons. And then I saw him. Cole Harrington. He was standing stiffly near the champagne tower, his father Martin beside him. And on his arm, clinging lightly as if she belonged there, was Sophie Lane. She was dressed in a champagne-colored gown this time, beaded, sweeping the floor, the kind of dress worth tens of millions. She leaned into Cole as though the two of them had stepped out of a fairy tale. When she saw Richard, she didn't falter. In fact, she brightened. "Mr. Bennet, you look so young," she said with an airy laugh. "You could pass for Cole's brother instead of his father-in-law." Martin chuckled awkwardly at the flattery. Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. Richard's expression didn't shift at first, but I knew him too well. The subtle tightening at the corner of his mouth was the equivalent of a thunderclap. "And you are?" my father asked, his tone polite but glacial. Sophie stepped forward, chin lifted. "I'm Cole's date tonight. Sophie Lane." The room might as well have been soundproof in that moment. Conversations stalled. Several sets of eyes turned to Martin, others to Cole. Cole cleared his throat. "She's my secretary. Isla couldn't make it tonight due to work." A statement meant to diffuse. It did not. Richard's gaze stayed on Sophie for exactly one more second before it shifted to Cole, and the temperature of the room dropped. "Cole," he said quietly, "why is your date not Isla?" Cole stiffened. Even after years at my side, he still couldn't hide his discomfort in front of my father. Martin tried to laugh it off. "William." The mistake was immediate. My father's eyes cut to him. "Did I ask you to speak?" The ripple that went through the crowd wasn't physical, but I felt it all the same. Even the Kingsley board members near the dais suddenly found their champagne fascinating. Martin's smile froze. That's when my phone buzzed. "Come in, Dad." When I stepped into the ballroom, the crowd parted like a tide. I wore black again. Sleek, sharp, a deliberate contrast to Sophie's gleaming gown. My heels clicked against the marble as people bowed their heads slightly in greeting. Richard didn't move, but his gaze flicked briefly toward me and I crossed to him. I wrapped my arm around his. "Evening, Dad." His eyes skimmed over me once before landing back on Cole. "Look at this mess," he said under his breath. I let my smile fade as I turned my head toward Cole. He looked at me as if searching for rescue. But I was not here to save him. Cole's eyes darted between me, my father, and the crowd that had quietly circled to watch. His posture screamed damage control, but it was already far too late for that. I let my gaze linger on him for a long, cool moment. Then, in a voice pitched perfectly to carry across the marble hall, I said, "Cole Harrington and I are over." The silence that followed was sharper than crystal. Gasps rose from a few corners. Champagne glasses stilled midair. Even the string quartet faltered before regaining their rhythm. Cole blinked at me, stunned. "Isla, what are you talking about?" Martin, pale and visibly rattled, rushed to fill the void. "This must be a misunderstanding. You've been engaged for years. You can't just..." I cut him off without raising my voice. "I can..." "And I have." The air shifted. From the edges of the room, whispers began to flow like water through cracks in stone. "Did you hear that? In front of everyone. What on earth did he do?" Cole stepped forward, lowering his voice in a plea meant only for me. "I know I've been distant lately. I know I've made mistakes. But don't just throw away 6 years like this." I met his eyes without a flicker. "I made up my mind weeks ago." That was when Sophie Lane's voice cut in, sugary at first but with steel beneath it. "You think people are objects you can just toss aside when you're done? No wonder Mr. Harrington doesn't." The slap came so fast I almost missed it. Martin's hand connected with her cheek in a sharp, echoing crack. Gasps broke out again. "Shut your mouth, you insolent girl," Martin hissed. "You've embarrassed my son enough already." Sophie's hand flew to her face, her eyes wide with outrage and disbelief. If she'd had any sense, she would have stopped there. But Sophie never knew when to stop. "Embarrassed him? I'm the only one here who's stood by him. Just because you're all rich doesn't mean you can treat people." Another slap, this time verbal, from the crowd. "That's the secretary? She's got a mouth on her." Imagine speaking to Richard Bennet's face like that. I turned slightly toward the onlookers, letting my voice slice through the murmurs. For anyone wondering, this is Cole's professional secretary. The one who shows up at black tie events in million-dollar gowns, courtesy of her boss. The one who posts every gift, every dinner, every private moment online for the world to see. Eyes swung toward Cole like the weight of an avalanche. He was breathing hard now, his carefully built facade crumbling. "You think this is about jealousy?" I continued, still in that calm, unhurried tone. "It's about judgment. About the fact that a CEO of a major firm has chosen someone like this to represent him. Someone who doesn't even know how to speak to the people who built his company's future." The humiliation in his eyes was almost physical. Richard's voice cut in, low but carrying. "You've wasted enough of my daughter's time, Cole. We'll discuss the rest privately." I gave Cole one last look, cool, measured, final. And then I turned my back on him in front of everyone. The air in the Kingsley ballroom had shifted into something electric and dangerous. It wasn't just gossip anymore. Every pair of eyes was fixed on us, hungry for the final blow. I turned back to Cole, my voice calm but honed like a scalpel. "You keep saying there's nothing going on between you and Sophie Lane. Fine. Let's talk about that nothing." His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. What kind of nothing buys a secretary a D+ bracelet worth $180,000? What kind of nothing sends her home with an $800,000 C-brand handbag? What kind of nothing takes her to Noir, the restaurant you've never once taken me to, cuts her steak for her and posts it online? The murmurs swelled. Someone near the champagne tower snorted outright. "And what kind of nothing carries her on his back, legs wrapped in gauze, when you once promised you'd only ever carry me?" Cole flinched. That hit exactly where I wanted it to. The crowd went still for half a heartbeat. Then, smack. The sound echoed through the marble. Richard Bennett's palm had connected with Cole's face so hard his head snapped to the side. Gasps, whispers, a sharp intake of breath from somewhere near the front. Cole straightened slowly, the mark already reddening on his cheek, his eyes wide with something between rage and disbelief. Sophie finally tried to speak. "We were innocent. Mr. Harrington and I." "Shut your mouth," Martin barked, stepping toward her. His face was blotchy with fury. "You've ruined my son. You've ruined everything." Sophie's expression twisted, but instead of retreating she lunged at him, grabbing at his hair like a common brawler in front of the city's elite. A woman near the dais let out a shocked laugh. Someone else muttered, "Well, there goes the last of their reputation." Cole stared at Sophie like he was seeing her for the first time, not the delicate, harmless girl he'd thought he was protecting, but the reckless, classless liability she truly was. And all around us the Harrington name was being stripped, piece by piece, in whispers that would be headlines by morning. Richard's voice cut cleanly through the chaos. "We're done here." I met Cole's eyes one last time. "You'll have plenty of time to think about the moment you chose her over me. It's the same moment you lost everything." Then I turned and left with my father, not looking back. By the next morning the Kingsley Gala was no longer just an event. It was a legend. The press hadn't been allowed inside, but they didn't need to be. Every whisper from the ballroom had already spread through the city's upper circles like wildfire. Within hours, those whispers had turned into a unified version of the story, a cautionary tale with the Harrington name at its center. Business first. Before Cole had even woken up, half of Harrington Enterprises board members were on emergency calls. The other half were in quiet meetings with their lawyers. Richard Bennett's withdrawal of support was absolute. Every joint project, every investment agreement, every line of credit that had been guaranteed by Bennett influence, all gone before lunch. By evening, suppliers had started reassessing their commitments. Bankers who once fought to take Cole's calls now developed sudden scheduling conflicts. Martin Harrington had built his empire with Bennett backing as a foundation. Without it, cracks appeared instantly. Personal second. Sophie Lane was fired the very next day. The official statement called it incompatible professional conduct, but everyone knew the truth. No company wanted the woman who had been humiliated in front of Richard Bennett to ever touch their brand. Her so-called fan following from her social media days turned on her overnight. Screenshots of her flaunting Cole's gifts became memes. Someone even made a compilation video titled "From Bracelet to Broke," the Sophie Lane story. For a few weeks she was a curiosity, interviewed by low-tier gossip blogs, clinging to the narrative that she was a victim of the rich protecting their own. By month's end even those offers dried up. The last I heard, she was working at a downtown movie theater taking tickets. He tried at first to keep up appearances, arriving at the office in the same tailored suits, holding the same morning briefings. But it was impossible to ignore the empty seats in the boardroom, the unanswered calls, the quiet departures of key staff. Deals stalled. Partnerships dissolved. Lawsuits appeared. He came to see me twice. The first time Mason blocked him in the lobby. The second time Richard himself told him to leave. By the third month Harrington Enterprises was a hollow shell of its former self. Martin, desperate to save face, blamed Cole for everything, for Sophie, for the gala, for provoking the Bennets. Cole for once didn't argue. He had the look of a man who'd seen exactly where he'd gone wrong and couldn't undo a single moment of it. Me. I moved on. Finally. Completely. Because when I said we were over, I meant it. Sophie Lane's downfall was complete. Her last desperate act had been to text Cole after months of silence, asking if he remembered what they had. According to Mason, Cole's reply had been short and ice-cold. Don't contact me again. The Harrington family name, once a fixture in the city's business pages, now appeared only in legal notices and asset auctions. Cole had gone from the golden young CEO to a cautionary tale told over champagne, about how a man could lose everything without ever setting foot in a competitor's office, simply by choosing the wrong person to protect. I, meanwhile, had filled my calendar with what I wanted. Travel, charity events worth attending, dinners with friends I'd neglected during those 6 years. For the first time in a long while, my life was quiet in all the right ways. No staged coincidences, no manufactured dramas, no scrambling to put out fires that weren't mine to start. One morning I was stretched out in a deck chair in my father's sprawling garden. The air was warm, scented with jasmine, and the sunlight was the kind that made everything look softer around the edges. I'd almost drifted off when a shadow fell across me. Miss Bennet. The voice was smooth, calm, and far too self-possessed for its youth. I opened my eyes to find a man standing there, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that made you want to look twice just to be sure you'd seen it right the first time. His eyes were clear, not the polished charm of a social climber, but the unguarded steadiness of someone who had nothing to prove. I'm Ethan Cross, he said. Mr. Bennet sent me to find you. Sunlight caught in his hair, turning it to gold, and for a moment the scene felt almost unreal. I sat up, taking him in. My father sent you? A faint smile touched his mouth. Yes. He thought we should meet. In another life I might have rolled my eyes at the idea of my father hand-picking introductions. But as I looked at Ethan, calm, grounded, nothing like the man I'd just left behind, I found myself setting my book aside. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to see what came next. The end.